What's going on, guys? It's Cimoooooooo. So today I'm bringing to you the winners and losers of the January 2020 ban list. There were so many different hits that took place, and with so many decks now fighting for that tier 1 status, like always, I want to bring you guys the aftermath report on what I think ended up being on top and what ended up getting completely and utterly castrated. So before we get into it, I do want to let you guys know that we have the Pro-Play Tour Invitational taking place this weekend in Orlando, Florida, the 24th through the 26th. If you don't already have your invite on Friday, we have the last chance qualifiers, which are just 8-man pods, and if you get first place, not only did you get your invite to the $10,000 prize invitational this weekend, but you also win a booster box of the latest set. So definitely come on down if you're in the area or if you want to have a chance of winning that $10,000 prize pool, and I'll of course being there doing live stream commentary coverage for the event. So links are in the description, and I hope to see you guys there. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it. So the first winner of the January 2020 ban list is actually Orcus. Yeah, I think a lot of people at first thought when Harp Horror was like the very first card on the ban list to be revealed, they just thought Orcus was screwed. But it turns out that you don't exactly need Harp Horror for Orcus to function, and I think when you have big payoff cards like Dingirsu, and the fact that Babel is still legal, I think that's one of the biggest things. A lot of people were really crying out for Babel to get banned just because of the level of interactivity that Orcus has on the opponent's turn with Babel active. The thing is, while Harp Horror is an incredibly powerful card, there is still ways to work around it. You can just as easily use an Orcus Nightmare to send something like your World Wand, banish the wand to resummon out the Nightmare, and it's really not too difficult to pretty much do the exact same combo. I think the difference is you're missing one singular extender to kind of help you get into that IP Masquerena setup. So if you have any way to replace that, which could be something, I don't know, like the Dangers or the myriad of different extender options that are available, you kind of just go right back to how the deck used to function. It's just not as easy now that Harp Horror is banned. But I definitely think Harp Horror is still a tier 1 contender and probably one of, if not the biggest winner of the January 2020 ban list. Now, next up on the list, we have Pendulum. Now, you're probably thinking, how the hell is Pendulum a winner on this list when Heavy Metal Foe's Electromite is now banned and Servant of Endymion is limited to 1? Well, the thing is, the deck actually doesn't need either of those pieces to still be a very strong contender. Pendulum still has plenty of possible options that it can play at its disposal to still make it an incredibly strong deck. And yes, not having Electromite means that you're losing out on a lot, and having only one copy of Servant can be difficult, but these things can be easily mitigated. When it comes to Servant, you still have Spell Power Mastery, so you're still able to get your one copy of Servant. It's now your goal, like you're reducing yourself from 6 copies to 4, because Servant went from 3 to 1. You also have the possibility to play cards like Magical Abductor, which can theoretically search your Servant anyway, so if you were really trying to get to that one copy of Servant, you can still just completely get there. It's just not as easy as just hard drawing it like you were able to before. And Electromite, yes, Electromite did a lot for the deck, but it wasn't like the end-all be-all. It kind of just helped Pendulum continue to be the strong threat that it's been, but you still have plenty of options at your disposal. You're still able to do a lot of the different plays that Pendulum is capable of. You still have cards like Endymion, the Mighty Master of Magic, which is an insanely powerful boss monster. So Pendulum is by no means dead, even though it did lose 2 of its strongest cards, and I guess one of those cards being limited, but nonetheless, Pendulum is going to be one of, if not, a top tier contender moving into this new format. Now, next up is Lunalight. Lunalight did lose a couple pieces from the ban list, being Azathoth, which is probably the biggest, as well as Nessie going to 1. I think Nessie going to 1's probably interchangeable very easily, but losing Azathoth does hurt a lot, because one of the strengths that Lunalight had was being able to go into Azathoth before you were able to get Nibiru, shutting down all possibility of your plays getting hand-trapped, and you can just set up whatever board that you want. But just because Azathoth is now banned doesn't necessarily mean the deck is any less potent. The deck is still very explosive. It has a lot of powerful plays at its disposal, and the thing is, when it comes to Lunalight Orcus, you still have the ability to abuse Tiger. You still have the ability to rank 4 spam. There's still so many different options that the deck has, both defensively and offensively, that I still think it's going to be a very strong contender, regardless of the fact that you lost your power play, let's call it, in Azathoth. Now, another series of decks that actually came out completely unscathed unscathed are the top tier control decks. So what I'm talking about here is specifically Altergeist and Guru Control. Both of these decks did not incur a single hit on this ban list, and these decks were already strong enough as is. Now you could make the argument that with Lightning Storm coming out in the TCG and Ignition Assault, that's kind of like a way to kind of counteract that these decks could have any potential in terms of competitive viability. But at the same time, Red Reboot went to 1, which was one of the banes of these decks' existence, and now you've got stuff like Solemn Warning moving its way up to 3, so now you can play a full-on Solemn Brigade if you so wish. There's still plenty of levels of interaction that both Guru Control and Altergeist have, that the fact that all the other decks have kind of gotten hit down a bit, it just only further propels these other decks that were at like the mid-tier status further up that tier ladder. So for all the Altergeist and Guru players out there, I'm sure you guys are very excited. Burning Abyss is another winner here. Tour Guide is now at 2, and the thing is, Burning Abyss isn't exactly like the old school Burning Abyss. It's more of like this amalgamation of just playing a bunch of level 3 extenders to be able to go into Cherubini and kind of either make this huge board that's difficult for your opponent to out, if not impossible, or you can kind of like play a go second version and kind of just try to Boral Sword OTK your opponent. But Tour Guide makes that much more viable now, and just having a big powerful normal summon that you can just back up all your other plays with, you really can't go too wrong. And then wrapping up the winners, we have the rogue decks. There are so many different rogue decks that are viable now, not just because they didn't really incur a hit, but because of support that they got recently, as well as the way everything else is kind of shaping up. These decks have a ton of potential. I'm talking about decks like Spiral, which now got the inclusion of Magician Souls from Magical Hero, Legendary Duelist. That's going to be a very interesting deck to see if that can manage to take off, because going first, it could set up some very powerful boards, and going second, it can very easily OTK. You've got decks like Hero, which Hero, again, didn't incur any hits and only got stronger with the introduction of Liquid Man, and there's so many different cool things that Hero can do, and we'll just have to see. Maybe it'll have a pretty decent shot. But you also have other decks that have already been proving themselves in the rogue tier category, like Magical Musketeer. This is probably the rogue deck that's topped more than any other rogue deck of the past several months. And you also have decks like Gren Maju, which again is a deck that has suffered no hits whatsoever. All the dangers apart from Nessie going to 1 are still viable. Gren Maju is still one hell of a card. Gizmek is still at 3. Potted Desires is fine. That deck is pretty much completely untouched apart from the Nessie as well, and I don't expect that deck to be going anywhere anytime soon. But now, of course, I want to talk about the losers, because that's what you guys are here to see, right? And probably the biggest loser of all is Sky Striker. Now, some people are still saying that Sky Striker is viable, and yet while time will tell, I definitely think Engage getting banned is probably the worst thing that could have possibly happened to this deck, because yes, while Kagari did go to 3, losing out on Engage and being able to have the search ability and flexibility to take any of the Sky Striker cards out of your deck and pretty much fine-tune your deck for any particular situation, you're not going to be able to be as nearly as consistent as you were before by just hoping you get the cards you need. Oh, maybe I'll get the Afterburner, maybe I'll get my 1 Widow Anchor, right? It just doesn't seem viable for any hope for this deck. Now again, We've seen Sky Striker live through a lot, but I definitely think this might be the nail in the coffin for the deck. Who knows though, we do have Rose coming out in Ignition Assault, and maybe that might be enough to help just further propel the deck into like a rogue level status. Kagari going to 3 is pretty good, and I don't think people should underestimate that, but Engage getting banned definitely hurt the deck a lot. Then we also have Thunder Dragon. I put Thunder Dragon as a loser on here. I think comparatively to Sky Striker, Thunder Dragon is still playable to some degree. Losing out Colossus is huge, but you can still play a variant of Thunder Dragon I think exists that's like Titan Control, where you're able to just pop your opponent's stuff during their turn and just have these big beefy Thunder Dragon cards. I still think a deck like that can exist, and a lot of people were using Thunder Dragon as like a supplementary engine in like these combo Danger Thunder Dragon decks anyway. They only played like, 5 Thunder cards regardless, just because you could take advantage of the Colossus. I don't know. It's a bit of an iffy one. We'll just have to see. I think people are going to continue to experiment with it, but I think overall it's definitely a loser when it comes to this list. Now the next loser, oh boy, we've got True Draco. Now this deck just got shafted. I mean, Diagram going to 1, you've got Demise going to 1, you've just lost so much consistency with this deck, and like, yeah, theoretically, like, you could just replace those cards with like more floodgates or like just more disruptors, but I don't know, you still got your monsters, so like maybe Draco can still exist in some form. Maybe you shift to playing like Pot of Desires or something, I don't know, but like you just lose so much consistency now because just being able to slap down a demise after you just burned your opponent out of resources, I mean, that's just one of the best feelings ever when you're playing that deck. And now the fact that there's only one demise in the deck, it's not going to bode too well for it. So I'm not hopeful for Draco, but I definitely think the deck is still playable in some form. I just don't think it's going to be good. Another loser is Sekka's Light decks. Now, this is a bit of a weird one because I don't think anyone would have predicted Sekka's Light getting hit to 1, and it's kind of unfortunate. I like that there was a card that existed in the game to force people to deck build in a certain way to get some sort of payoff, and the fact that you could play Sekka's Light, which is essentially 3 Pot of Greed, if you played, you know, 37 plus monsters in your deck, that seemed like a really cool mechanic. But now that Sekka's Light is at 1, no one's going to be incentivized to be able to deck build that way anymore. And the thing is, these Sekka's Light decks were actually pretty good. Like we saw, Burning Abyss typically took advantage of Sekka's Light. There was Danger Thunder Dragon decks that took advantage of Sekka's Light. And while some people would argue that these decks are very like build my board, uninteractive style of decks, I still think having something like this was neat, but these decks definitely now lost out because Sekka's Light is at 1. I think moving forward, I just want to say, I hope that we get like a level of card design like this that promotes building decks in a certain way to get a certain payoff like Sekka's Light provided, but Sekka's Light decks are definitely dead in the water. And the last loser on this list, and this is a bit of a weird one, but the side deck. The side deck is kind of a loser in this situation because did you notice how many cards that have been like almost side deck staples that got hit on this ban list? We had Pankratops go to 1, Red Reboot went to 1, Mind Control went to 2. Like there was just some odd hits. It's just so weird because these are cards that are really only played in the side deck. And yeah, I guess if you're playing like a trap intensive deck, you could argue that Red Reboot is kind of like this auto win card that just completely blows out anyone playing a strategy like that. So maybe something like that isn't exactly healthy, not to mention with Lightning Storm coming out, maybe they just wanted to promote that. But nonetheless, it's this really just weird element that I think not a lot of people have thought about when it comes to the side deck, that people are going to have to shift up their strategy. It's not really just as simple as, oh, 3 Pankratops, 3 Red Reboot, 3 Mind Control. You can't really do that anymore. So I think we're going to see a little bit of a diversified side decks, which is a good thing, but side decks definitely lost a lot of their capabilities. And I think to wrap up this video, I had like this section of like a couple decks that I didn't exactly know what to do with. One of them being Salamangreat. Salamangreat's a weird one because Mirage Stallion is banned, but yet we have Lady Debug back at 3. And even with Mirage Stallion being banned, I think Salamangreat is still playable, but like the question is it good, right? Like I think that's the big question on everyone's mind. Does it have to shift to this like control deck that plays a lot more traps and just takes advantage of the fact that the Salamangreat cards are so recursive? Or can you still play it like in the same way, but you just have to deal with the fact that Mirage Stallion doesn't exist? I don't know. It's a bit of a weird one, and I'm curious to hear what you guys think down in the comments because, yeah, it's playable, but is it good enough to keep seeing competitive play? That's the question. And the other deck on this list is actually Dinosaur, because Dinosaur, yes, it's still playable like in its Lost World form. I think that's perfectly fine, but when you're looking at it from the perspective of like True King Dinosaur, you've got Diagram getting hit to 1, which was kind of one of the focal points of the deck, but then you have Lithosygym back at 1 from being banned, and that was one of the most powerful cards at the deck's disposal. So you had this weird exchange for that deck. And again, Dinosaur, it's been one of those rogue contenders that's been absolutely incredible just due to cards like Ultimate Conductor, Tyranno, just so many different big blowout cards. But the thing is, I don't exactly know if it's a winner because Lithosygym is back or if it's a loser because Diagram got hit to 1. Again, you guys can let me know down in the comments. That's why I like making these winner and loser videos for every ban list, because there's just so much subjective opinion out there on like what is actually really good right now, and I'm really excited to see where the format ends up. So guys, that's going to wrap up this video. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think. I'd really love to hear your thoughts. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. Be sure to like the video as always. Subscribe to the channel for more amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content, and if you found this video informative, consider supporting me on Patreon or becoming a YouTube channel member. Because just by showing your support in any way that you can, you're investing in my ability to continue bringing you amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. So thanks so much again, and we'll see you next time.